What's up, guys? Yeah, you thought Red Reviews was over. Well, you can't get rid of me that easily. And today, for my first review of 2024, I will be reviewing Dune Part 2, which is co-written and directed by Denis Villenueve and stars Timothée, Chalamet. Yeah, I said his name right. Zendaya, Rebecca Ferguson, Josh Brolin, Austin Butler, Florence Pugh, Dave Bautista, Christopher Walken, Seydoux, Stellan Skarsgård, and Javier Bardem. In this movie, while Paul faces the inevitability of becoming a messiah, the savior among the Fremen, he seeks vengeance for the murder of his father, the Duke Leto Atreides. So I saw this movie at an early IMAX screening at an AMC on the 25th of February, which is where I got these pretty sick posters over here. I'm probably going to put this poster in the same drawer I put the Mission Impossible posters, and then I'm going to forget about them as well. I forgot about the Mission Impossible posters. I don't know where I put them, as I said in my review. So I saw the movie at an early IMAX screening, but I was unable to make a review until this moment. So sorry for the late review. And yeah, of course, I got the Dune 2 popcorn bucket, and I will be proudly displaying it on the background of this video. In preparation for this review, I actually went to see a reissue of Denis Villeneuve's original Dune in theaters a few weeks back. That was one of the films that released as part of HBO Max's same-day releases, where movies would premiere in theaters and on HBO Max on the same day during the pandemic. I wasn't able to catch that movie in theaters when it originally came out, and watching it in theaters for the first time a few weeks back blew me away. That is the movie that comes to mind whenever someone mentions the concept of the art house blockbuster. It is not a film that has major audience appeal. It's very slow-paced and atmospheric, building tension over time. I think Denis Villeneuve struck the perfect balance between being a large studio blockbuster, being an adaptation of Frank Herbert's fantastic novel, which is one of my favorite books ever, by the way, and also being his own film with his own twist on it. As you can see, I actually own Denis Villeneuve's first Dune on 4K, which this 4K looks stupendous. I would highly recommend it. It looks amazing. It's kind of the perfect modern reinterpretation of Dune, making a lot of the oddities in the book more digestible for modern audiences. I mean, this film is so much of a cultural impact now that you have people doing stuff like this. It's crazy. I mean, these movies have such a big cultural impact that Ben Shapiro reviewed both movies. When Ben Shapiro reviews your movie, it's pretty safe to say it's a cultural impact. This film has had the biggest second week box office since Barbenheimer, and I think that's both well-deserved and really cool. I mean, this is a nerd movie about space politics, and the fact that it's doing so well is awesome. I also saw a reissue of David Lynch's Dune, which is apparently a good example of studio interference with the production of a film. And while it's not good, I enjoyed it quite a bit, and it's also very accurate to the book. And finally, I streamed Jodorowsky's Dune, which is a documentary on French-Chilean director Alejandro Jodorowsky's canceled Dune adaptation, which sounds absolutely wild. I mean, it had Pink Floyd, Salvador Dali, and H.R. Giger all attached to it, just crazy stuff. Orson Welles was also part of it. Part of me is actually kind of glad that that film never got to see the light of day because, well...
When you make a picture, you must not respect the novel. It's like you get married, no? You go with the wife, white, the woman is white, you take the woman. If you respect the woman, you will never have child. You need to open the costume and to the bride. And then you will have your picture. I was Frank Heber, you know, like this, but with love. With love.
There's a lot of ego that went into that. Nevertheless, that film stands out as one of the greatest films never made, like Stanley Kubrick's Napoleon, Terry Gilliam's Watchmen, and James Cameron's Spider-Man. In preparation, I also read the book, which has now become one of my favorite books of all time with its themes of politics, the rise and fall of empires, religion, and the consequences of following a charismatic leader. Moving on with the review proper, the visuals in this film are an easy 11 out of 10. All of Denis Villeneuve's films look absolutely spectacular, and I truly think that this is one of the best looking movies I have ever seen in my entire life. Greg Fraser is the director of photography on this film, and he is rapidly becoming one of my favorite DPs working today, having worked on films such as Let Me In, Killing Them Softly, Zero Dark 30, Rogue One: A Star Wars Story, Dune, The Batman, and The Creator, as well as having worked on a few episodes of The Mandalorian. His work is, in my opinion, quite phenomenal, and it leads to this movie looking drop-dead gorgeous when viewed in theaters. As I said, I first saw this movie in IMAX, and it was probably the most memorable IMAX experience I've had in my entire life. The visuals, in tandem with Hans Zimmer's incredible score, elevate this movie so much for me. I've seen this movie in theaters twice now, and both times, I've been absolutely blown away by the visuals. Whether it's a crazy good-looking wide shot or a close-up of an actor's face, there is always something incredible to look at in this film. The whole opening scene of this movie is so well shot that it's actually kind of insane that there's a scene that looks this good in a modern movie. The color grading, effects, costume, cinematography, everything works perfectly together. This is one of the finest examples of the integration of visual effects into a modern blockbuster ever, I think. The CGI is completely unnoticeable to my eyes. What Denis Villeneuve and his incredible team of VFX artists have accomplished here is nothing short of marvelous. It is integrated so seamlessly into this movie that you don't even realize it's there at all, and I think I have a pretty good eye for this kind of thing. I was completely immersed throughout this entire experience, and there was not a single moment where I thought, ooh, that does not look as good as the rest of the film. I really can't put into words how amazing this movie looks. You're just gonna have to see it for yourself. I mentioned Hans Zimmer's amazing score earlier, and yeah, it's fantastic. I think I like it more than the score for the first film, which was my favorite soundtrack of 2021. And the love theme for Paul and Chani it's a masterpiece. The soundtrack for this movie is reminiscent of the first film soundtrack, whilst throwing in some new tunes in there, which I love. Since my first viewing of this movie, I've listened to the soundtrack while studying for tests, doing the dishes, showering, and I'll probably listen to it while editing this video. I'm definitely buying the vinyl release by Mutant sometime soon. Moving on, this movie is decidedly not a direct adaptation of Frank Herbert's fantastic novel. There are a lot more changes to the narrative in this movie than Denis' first Dune film, and it leaves the David Lynch film as strangely the most accurate adaptation of the book. When you're making a book-to-screen adaptation, there are things that you just have to change. You cannot just make a direct one-to-one translation. In transcending mediums, you have to tweak and change some aspects to make it easier for moviegoers to digest. However, Denis changes a lot of stuff in this movie to the point where I was a little mad the first time I saw it. I mean, just look at the presence of the Chom Company in these movies. It's almost non-existent, and they're major players in the book. Minor characters like Hera and her two kids, the Count Fenring, and even Thufir Hawat aren't in this movie at all. Thufir's exclusion is especially baffling to me. He's such a big part of this portion of the Dune narrative in the book, and it's crazy to me that audiences who've only seen the movies are gonna have no clue what happened to Thufir. I mean, he was in the first movie. Parts that had Thufir in the book have been reworked to fit the movie. For instance, the arena fight with Fade Rotha was part of a plot by Thufir to have Fade fight an undrugged opponent, but still come out on top by using underhanded tactics. The opponent is undrugged in this movie as well, but there's also two other fighters in the arena alongside them, and Thufir is obviously not a part of this at all. Also, the whole scene with the boy with a needle in his leg is cut entirely from the film. Thufir Hawat in this movie is like Yue Wellington in the first Dune film, where he was a major part of that portion of the Dune narrative, but his inclusion in the film was very minor. Thufir Hawat is like that in this movie, except his inclusion in the film is even more minor because he's not even included in the film at all. The most major thing to address is that the ending is quite different to that of the book. I know a lot of people are going to get their undies in a twist because it differs from the book, but trust me on this. This change makes the film better as a film. I saw this movie a second time with the two people I trust the most when it comes to Dune, that being two classmates of mine, and they thought that the ending makes for a better film, which is a sentiment I share. Especially important to keep in mind, I think, is the fact that this ending is in keeping with the feeling of Dune. This is a good change. I'll talk more about the ending in a spoiler section at the end of the video. A change I'll now talk about is how they handled Stilgar in this movie. Now, I got a lot of thoughts on how they treated my boy Stilgar in this movie. Stilgar is my favorite character in the book. He's this wise, noble, honorable, smart leader of the Fremen people. One of the things that just automatically makes me like a character is when a character is a smart leader. If you write me a smart leader in a narrative, he's probably going to be my favorite character. William Wallace in Braveheart, Maximus Decimus Meridius in Gladiator, and Caesar in the newer Planet of the Apes trilogy are prime examples of this. I'm just a sucker for like a well-written, smart leader guy, and Stilgar is absolutely that in the book. And that's because he starts out as this wise individual guiding Paul and Jessica in the ways of the Fremen, but as the book goes on, he becomes a fanatic of the Fremen Messiah. There's this really heartbreaking line in the book where Paul is mentioning how Stilgar used to be his equal, but has degraded himself into a blind follower of the Messiah. And Paul says that he gained a follower, but lost a friend. Now you got a similar line in this movie, but it's applied to the Fremen people as a whole instead of honing in on just Stilgar and how Paul lost Stilgar as a friend. As previously mentioned, one of the core themes in Dune is the consequences of following a charismatic leader. So I think that applying this line to Stilgar instead of the general Fremen people as a whole would have made it so much more impactful. Stilgar is just kind of like a bit of a butt monkey in this film's narrative. Like, he's just there to like crack jokes, and it's just weird. It just feels off, and it takes me out of the experience. In this movie, you only get the blind follower, you don't get the friend. I like a lot of the aspects which this film expands on, such as the Bene Gesserit propaganda. This is a big theme in the book where the Bene Gesserit spread their propaganda from planet to planet in order to pave the way for the Kwisatz Haderach. And I like the way this film deals with that, seeing as Paul dislikes this greatly, while his mother is herself a member of the Bene Gesserit, so I like that dynamic a lot. I also like the way that Paul and Chani's romance is handled. This film would not have worked if the relationship was not believable, and it was believable for me. I think it was handled as well as it could have been without overshadowing some of the other elements in this movie. One really cool thing Denis expands on from the book is the fact that the Fremen opinion on Paul is divided. Some are for this foreign messiah and some are against. That's something that's not explored very much in the book, but I was glad to see present in the film. Also, they do this cool thing where Stilgar is from the south, and the other Fremen like Chani can tell because of his accent. It's a small detail, but it does a lot for fleshing out the world. Additionally, Gurney Halleck finally has a Balisat scene. There was a deleted scene in the first film where he played the Balisat, but I'm still so glad to see it in the final product of one of these films. I mean, come on, it's like his whole thing. It's like that and reciting poems. One thing I will mention is how names are said just in so many different ways throughout this movie. Characters in this movie pronounce Jamis as Jamis, Raban as Rabban, Arrakis as Arrakis, and Leto as Leto. Just something interesting I thought I'd bring up. I am now going to proceed to geek out over what I think is my favorite part of the movie, that being Feyd Rautha. I'm getting chills right now just thinking about Austin Butler's brilliant portrayal of Feyd in this film. Before this, I only knew Butler as Elvis, but he can really act. He was so perfectly psychotic in this movie, and it gave me everything I wanted to see from him, having read the book. There's a very fine line when making a side villain a psychopath in films, where this character could come off really dark and manic and crazy, or on the other hand, could come off goofy and idiotic and kind of dumb. Feyd is the first kind. He's insane and unstable, and he loves violence, and he kind of loves the thrill of getting hurt. It's really awesome the way Denis handles his portrayal. He is an absolute scene stealer. It also helps that the gladiator scene in this movie is my favorite part of the book. I really like the imposing design of Giedi Prime with its harsh angles, black sun, and its organic looking fireworks. I like the triangular arena, which is in the book, and the fact that the whole scene on Giedi Prime is in black and white. Although they did change something with him that I feel is for the worse. A little bit about the book. You see, in the book, he's not only crazy, but he's also a cheater. He uses like underhanded methods and trickery in order to win fights. But in this movie, he's more of like an honorable, noble fighter. I mean, he even tells someone that he fights, "You fought well." I feel like book Feyd would never do that. And I think that if you're gonna write a psychotic character, take it all the way. Feyd isn't really the kind of guy to have a code to live by. So just make him an insane character, willing to screw over any and all people to get his way. Oh well, I guess Sting's Feyd reigns supreme with his metal underwear. One really epic thing in this movie that I really enjoyed was the scene where Paul first rides the sandworm. It is appropriately epic, as it should be. And there's even this like lingering electric guitar riff as the scene ends that reminded me of the electric guitar in Lynch's film. It's pretty metal, okay? Trust me, it's awesome. Now, I'm going to talk about one more thing before I do a short spoiler section, that being the jokes in the film. I already talked about how I feel that this movie sort of ruins Stilgar, but the jokes are also something that permeate throughout the film as a whole. While the first film is a lot slower paced and atmospheric, this one is a lot more fast paced and action packed, and the jokes really help to make this movie have an even quicker pacing. However, I found some of the jokes kind of annoying, especially due to the fact that the audience in the first screening I went to, the IMAX one, were laughing their heads off at the most random line of dialogue. The characters could be saying something like entirely normal, and the theater would freaking quake with these people's laughter. It was really annoying, especially since some of these lines are supposed to be taken seriously. I'll admit, maybe it's because I read the book, And I know how some of these lines are supposed to be interpreted, but the jokes in this movie made it feel less like an art house blockbuster and more like a generic studio movie. It feels like the movie had like a certain tone, and then some studio executive saw it and went, "It's good, but it needs more jokes." Probably like in order to make the film more accessible for audiences. Either way, I did not like it, and a vast majority of the jokes did not land for me and served only to actively take me out of the experience. You know, the jokes sounded almost like Marvel movie jokes, especially when they came out of Stilgar's mouth. I know that with all these points, it may sound like I didn't like this movie, but rest assured I did. As I said, the visuals are truly an 11 out of 10. Now I'm going to get into some spoilers, so if you haven't seen the movie yet, I would recommend turning the video off and going to watch it. This is your spoiler warning. Spoilers! So firstly, I can't not talk about Alia. This little girl is my actual favorite character in the book. I know I said it was Stilgar, but I was actually a lying man when I said that. Sue me. Don't actually sue me. I lost my wallet a few days back and I'm broke. I actually lost it on the bus going to see Dune 2 a second time with a friend. Maybe that friend actually stole my wallet. John, I'm onto you. So Alia is so awesome in the book. She's a little girl whom Jessica was pregnant with as she changed the water of life in the ritual to become a Reverend Mother. Obviously, this affects Alia in a pretty major way. Okay, so when she's born, everyone thinks she's like basically a demon. She's born with all the wisdom of a Reverend Mother bestowed upon her, and she dominates any room she's in. She has extreme confidence, and she even calls the Emperor by his first name in the book. She's so confident that the Emperor himself captures her, and she's just chilling. She's like, "Nah, bro, you know my brother Paul? Yeah, he's gonna find me, and he's gonna come in here, and he's gonna kill all of you." She even kills her grandfather, the Baron Harkonnen, with the Gom Jabbar. It's so awesome. And did I mention she's 2 years old? Talking like an adult, at 2 years old, she is the coolest 2-year-old in fiction. In this movie, she's just a fetus. And Denis gave her the ability to converse with her mother, which I think is a good change if you're not allowing her to be born. I just really wish she was born because she just is so cool in the book. However, the changing of the water of life is undoubtedly the coolest scene in the movie, and the way that they show the fetus is actually really cool. Denis was clever in hiding Alia from all of the marketing, and I love that the first human line in this movie is Paul speaking to Alia. And I was so glad to see that there is one scene in the movie where they tease an aspect of the book that I really wanted to see, and that's the fact that Alia can send these like messages through time and plant them in the future for Paul to find. It's really conceptual and strange, and it's something that I was really curious to see, and I'm glad that Denis handled it in the way that he did by casting Anya Taylor-Joy, whom I definitely don't have a crush on, to play an older Alia. I'm really excited to see where they take this character in the next and final film, which is going to be an adaptation of Dune Messiah, which Denis has expressed interest in making. Just don't recast her, please. Anya Taylor-Joy will now be in 2 of the biggest Sand movies of the year. No elaboration, but I will have a review for that other Sand movie upon its release. Secondly, that ending. Chani is mad at Paul for accepting his role as Messiah as he goes off to fight the Great Houses for not accepting his ascendancy to Emperor. The book did not end that way at all, but again, I think that this change is validated in the film and makes for a better experience than ending it the way the book does. In the book, it just kind of ends after Paul becomes Emperor, and there's not really any loose threads apart from the jihad. By ending the movie the way Denis does, it leaves open the possibility for a sequel adapting to Messiah. Most importantly, this ending is in keeping with the feeling of Dune. This isn't a change that's made for the sake of having a change. I have a good feeling for this sort of thing. This is a good change. Moving on, one thing I didn't really understand is one line that's said where Jessica says that she wants to go south so that the Kwisatz Haderach can be born there. Is she speaking symbolically in this scene? Like so that Paul can symbolically accept his role as a Kwisatz Haderach by drinking the water of life, which, unlike the book, she just completely condones and even pressures Paul into doing. I'm confused because she looks at her pregnant belly as she says this, implying that she's speaking about Alia. So does she want Alia to be the Kwisatz Haderach? It was the one line that left me a little confused, so please comment your theories and explanations below if you can. I would like to clear that up for myself. Finally, I'd like to talk about the fact that Beast Raban just kind of dies. It's very unceremonious and doesn't take like any build up at all. He just dies at the hand of Gurney and it's over with like a quick stab within the minute. I was hoping he would at least get to like swing his famous incline whip a few times, but nope, he just dies. Oh well. That's all I wanted to talk about. This is going to be a pretty lengthy review, I can tell, but if you stuck around until the end, thank you very much. It's been really fun talking with my friends about this movie. In my school, it's like everyone's seen it. I do think that this is a better movie than the original in a lot of aspects, and I think a lot of people, myself included, like this film more than the original. I'm going to give a shout out to Finn Eager for being the best moneylender at my school. I'll be back with more reviews pretty soon. Go have a nice day. What's left of it. Peace.